The city of glass towers glowed under the red sky. It was not Earth, not anything close. The streets were full of tall alien figures with silver eyes and long cloaks, and among them walked one human, alone, tired, and far from home. His name was Daniel. He had come as a traveler, searching for work, food, and a safe place to rest. But humans were rare here, and every eye seemed to follow him. He felt like prey surrounded by hunters. Shadows stretched across the streets as night fell. Strange lights flickered in the sky, like moving stars. Daniel found himself near the old market. The air was thick with voices speaking a language he did not fully understand. He only caught fragments, whispers about humans, whispers about value, whispers about danger. Then she appeared, an alien woman with skin like pale silver and dark eyes that glowed faintly blue. She was dressed in mourning colors, a black cloak, heavy and torn. Her steps were slow, but her gaze sharp as a blade. When she stopped in front of him, silence seemed to fall around them. She spoke in broken human tongue. Her voice was soft, but heavy with meaning. "Rent me for one night, human." Daniel froze. The words hit him like fire. He thought he had misheard, but the crowd nearby also turned, staring, waiting. Her voice had carried, and now eyes burned into him from every side. It was not just an offer. It was a command, a challenge, maybe even a trap. He knew nothing about the laws of this world, but he felt in his bones that if he said no, something worse would follow. His throat was dry. He whispered back, "Why me?" But she only repeated slower this time, "Rent me." One night, the crowd did not move, but their silence was louder than thunder. Daniel felt trapped. He wanted to run, but his legs were heavy. He wanted to fight, but against who? Against what? He had no weapon, no friend, no escape. Finally, he nodded. He thought maybe agreeing would buy him time, maybe he would learn what she wanted, maybe he could survive another day. She turned at once and began to walk. The crowd broke apart silently, making way. Daniel followed, every step echoing in his chest like a drumbeat of fear. They walked through narrow alleys. The lights grew dimmer, the streets quieter. The walls around them were old, covered in strange glowing marks. Daniel wondered if they were warnings or prayers. He could not tell. At last, she stopped at a small door hidden in shadow. She touched the metal surface, and it opened without. A sound inside. The air was warm and filled with the scent of burning oils. The room was dark, lit only by a single crystal lamp. Daniel hesitated at the door. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice sharp with fear. The alien widow looked at him for a long time. Her eyes were deep, unreadable. Finally, she said, "I want your presence. I want your courage, and I want to live." Her words made no sense. Renting someone for a night was not about courage. It was about something else, something darker. But before he could ask again, she moved closer. Her hand brushed his arm, cold, as ice yet trembling. "You do not understand," she whispered. "I am hunted. I am marked. I am alone." Daniel stepped back. "Why me?" he demanded. She leaned closer, her breath shaking. "Because only a human can save me." The words cut through him like lightning. Save her? From who? From what? Before he could reply, a sharp sound echoed outside. Footsteps heavy and fast. Voices shouted in the alien tongue, harsh and urgent. The widow's eyes widened with terror. "They found me," she whispered. She grabbed his hand and pulled him deeper into the dark room. Daniel's heart raced. He did not know what danger was coming. He did not know if she was a victim or a liar. All he knew was that he had stepped into something far larger than himself. Outside, the footsteps stopped at the door. A voice like steel shouted, demanding entry. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The widow pressed a finger to her lips, urging silence. The door shook as fists pounded against it. The crystal lamp flickered. Shadows stretched across the walls. Daniel realized then, this was not about renting, not about one night. This was about survival, about secrets, about something hidden and dangerous. And now he was part of it, whether he wanted to be or not. The pounding grew louder. The voice, outside, roared. The widow's hand tightened around his. "Do not leave," she whispered, "or you will die." And in that moment, Daniel understood the truth. The strange offer had never been about choice. It had been a trap. A trap that was now closing in from every side. The pounding on the door grew louder. Daniel stood frozen, his breath caught in his chest. The alien widow's grip on his hand was like iron. Her glowing blue eyes begged him to stay silent. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pounding stopped. The silence was worse, sharp and heavy. Daniel could hear muffled voices outside, whispering in their strange tongue. The sound of boots moved away, but slowly, like hunters circling prey. The widow let out a trembling breath. "They will return," she whispered. "They always return." Daniel pulled his hand free, fear boiling inside him. "What is happening here?" he demanded. "Why drag me into this?" She looked at him, and for the first time he saw sadness, not danger. Her voice shook. "I am alone. My mate is gone, my family gone, my house cursed. Only I remain, and they want me erased." Daniel's anger softened, though confusion remained. "Why me?" he asked again, the question burning inside him. Her answer was simple but heavy. "Because you are human, because you are not part of their war, because you still can choose." Daniel wanted to walk away, to run from this madness, but something in her voice held him. Something in her eyes made him pause. There was truth there, sharp and deep. The widow moved to the small crystal lamp and touched it. Light spread across the room, revealing old markings on the walls. Symbols, burned into the stone. "They call me widow, but I was more," she said, her voice low. "My mate was a soldier. He carried secrets. And when he died, the hunters came for me." Daniel studied the marks. They looked like maps, like codes. He realized her mate had hidden something, and now she was the key. "You think I can help you?" Daniel asked, his voice quiet. She nodded slowly. "You are already helping," she whispered. "By standing here. By not leaving me to die." He wanted to deny it, wanted to say he was only caught in accident, but in his heart, he knew the truth. If he had walked away at the market, she would already be dead. The night stretched long. Outside, the city lights glowed faintly through cracks in the old door. Inside, the two strangers shared silence, heavy but not empty. Daniel sat on the floor, his back against the cold stone. The widow sat across from him, her cloak wrapped tightly, her eyes watching him carefully. Hours passed. Daniel spoke first, his voice low. "On my world, we bury the dead in the ground. We mark their names. We visit them. But here, how do you remember?" The widow's eyes softened. She touched a small pendant around her neck. "In my world, we burn the ashes into crystal so they can shine forever. This is all I have left of him." Daniel felt something twist in his chest. He thought of Earth, of people he had lost. In that moment, the alien widow did not feel so alien. She felt like someone carrying grief, someone carrying weight too heavy for one soul. The silence between them grew warmer. Daniel found himself telling her stories, small pieces of his life. He spoke of rain on earth, of rivers, of forests, things she had never seen. Her eyes widened as if each word painted a new world for her. And in return, she told him of the stars beyond, of cities built inside mountains, of oceans that glowed in the night. Their voices became softer, slower, until they were only whispers in the dark. The bond was strange, sudden but real. A human and an alien widow, bound by loss, by danger, by the heavy silence of the hunted. But the night was not kind. Suddenly, the crystal lamp flickered. Daniel tensed. The widow's eyes widened with fear. "They are close," she whispered. "They follow even in silence." He stood quickly, his fist tight, though he had no weapon. "What do they want?" he asked. Her voice was trembling now, almost breaking. "They want what grows inside me." The word struck him like a blade. Daniel stared at her, not understanding. "You mean?" She placed her hand against her stomach, her eyes never leaving his. Yes, I carry life. I carry what they fear, what they will kill to erase. The air turned heavy. Daniel felt the world tilt. This was not about renting, not about company. It was about survival, about a secret unborn life that could change everything. He stepped back, his mind racing. You mean you're— Yes, she whispered, cutting him off. Pregnant, with something they call forbidden. Silence fell like a storm. Daniel could hear his heartbeat echo in the room, her eyes filled with tears. They will not stop. They will never stop. And now you are part of this. Before Daniel could speak, before he could even process the truth, the sound returned. Heavy boots, closer this time. The hunters had come back. The door rattled as shadows moved outside. Daniel looked at her, and she looked at him. Their bond sealed not by choice, but by fate. And in that instant, Daniel knew. This was no longer about one night. It was about the bond that had already begun. A bond that would lead them to either freedom or death. The night was no longer quiet. Heavy boots echoed outside the small house. Shadows moved like predators in the dark. Daniel stood near the door, his fists tight. Though he had nothing but his own body to defend himself. The widow clutched her cloak. Her other hand pressed against her stomach as if guarding what was inside. Tell me the truth, Daniel whispered urgently. What is it you're carrying? Her eyes met his, full of fear and fire. It is not only a child, she said, her voice breaking. It is something new, something neither human nor alien, something they believe must be destroyed. Daniel froze, his mind spinning. A hybrid, he thought. A life that crossed two worlds, but how could that be? She was alien, he was human, and yet, he felt her words were no lie. He felt the weight of her secret pressing into him like a storm. The pounding on the door began again, harder this time. Voices shouted in their strange tongue, demanding entry. Daniel's chest tightened. They know, he whispered. They know you carry it. The widow nodded slowly, tears burning in her eyes. My mate was taken from me before the truth could be hidden. He died to keep this life safe, and now they want me silenced too. But when I saw you human, I saw hope. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to say he was no hero, but there was no time. The door cracked under the weight of alien fists. The lamp flickered, and shadows stretched like claws. Where do we go? Daniel demanded. The widow's voice was sharp now, full of command. There is a passage below, a tunnel. We must move before they break through. She pulled aside a stone tile on the floor, revealing a hidden stair. Daniel didn't hesitate. He grabbed her arm and helped her down. The air was damp and cold below, the tunnel narrow and dark. The sounds of boots and breaking wood above made every step urgent. The tunnel stretched long, lit only by faint glowing marks on the walls. Daniel kept close to her, his mind racing. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but fear forced him into silence. The only sound was their hurried footsteps and her uneven breathing. At last, they reached a wider chamber. The widow sank against the wall, her hand on her stomach again. Her face was pale, her body trembling. Daniel knelt beside her, fear flashing in his chest. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head, but her voice was weak. No. It is the child. It grows fast, too fast. Daniel's throat went dry. He had no idea what kind of life she carried, but he could see the pain in her eyes, the strain on her body. And still she held on, refusing to give up. You don't understand, she whispered. If they capture me, they will cut me open. They will burn what I carry, and the hope of change will die with me. Her words cut through him like a blade. Daniel felt anger rise, not just at her hunters, but at the cruel world that wanted to erase her. He clenched, his fists. Then we won't let them take you, he said firmly. Not tonight, not ever. The widow looked at him, her eyes shining in the dim glow. Why? She asked softly. Why would a human risk his life for me? Daniel paused, searching for an answer. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe because I can't watch someone else lose everything. Maybe because no one stood for me once, and I know how it feels. Her lips trembled, but a faint smile broke through her fear. "You are strange, human," she whispered. "Strange, but strong." Before he could reply, a new sound echoed through the tunnels, metal scraping against stone, followed by the faint hiss of alien voices. Daniel stood quickly, his heart pounding. "They've found the passage," he said, his voice low. The widow tried to rise, but her body was weak. Daniel helped her, lifting her arm over his shoulder. Together they stumbled deeper into the tunnel. The glowing marks flickered faintly, guiding them like dying stars. The sound behind them grew louder. Heavy boots, strange weapons charging with crackling energy. Daniel's chest burned with fear, but his steps never slowed. He felt her weight against him, fragile yet strong in ways he couldn't explain. She was not just a burden, she was the reason he kept moving. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. Water dripped from above, glowing moss lit the stone with faint green light. Daniel lowered her onto a flat rock. His breath came fast, sweat on his face. The widow's eyes darted around the cavern. "There is a gate," she whispered, pointing toward a dark corner. Daniel followed her gaze and saw an old metal door, half buried in stone. But before he could move, the sound of hunters filled the tunnel behind them. The widow's voice shook. "If we reach the gate, we may escape. But if they catch us here, it ends." Daniel nodded, his body tense. He had never been a soldier, never been a hero. But tonight, he had no choice. The shadows stretched across the cavern wall. Alien hunters stepped into view, their silver eyes glowing, their weapons raised. Daniel felt the air grow cold. The widow clutched her stomach, her lips trembling with pain and fear. And in that moment, Daniel understood something. This was not just her fight, not just her secret. This was his fight too. Because the life inside her was not just alien, not just human. It was something new, something that could change everything. The hunters stepped closer. Daniel stood in front of her, his body the only shield she had. His voice was low but firm. "They'll have to kill me first." The cavern echoed with silence for a heartbeat. Then the weapons hummed, glowing with deadly light. The widow's whisper reached his ear, soft but unshaken. "Then we fight together." The cavern glowed faintly with green moss. Daniel stood tall in front of the widow, his fists clenched, his body ready though he had no weapon. The hunters closed in, their silver eyes burning, their weapons humming with deadly light. But before the first strike could fall, a sharp whistle echoed across the cavern. The hunters froze, their heads snapping toward the tunnel. A new figure stepped into the light, cloaked and hooded, walking with calm steps. The hunters lowered their weapons instantly as if this figure commanded them. Daniel's pulse quickened. The widow's eyes widened in shock. Her lips whispered, a name he could not understand, a name filled with anger and pain. The cloaked figure pushed back the hood, revealing a face not alien, but human. Daniel staggered. Another human, here on this world, walking among hunters as if one of them. "Impossible," Daniel breathed. The widow's voice trembled with rage. "No, not impossible. Betrayal." The man smiled coldly, his eyes sharp, his expression proud. "Daniel," he said, his voice smooth. "I wondered when I would finally meet the other human." Daniel's fists tightened. "Who are you?" he demanded. The man stepped closer, the hunters parting for him like servants before a king. "My name is Marcus, once a traveler like you, but unlike you, I chose survival, I chose power." The widow hissed through her teeth. "You chose to sell your soul." Marcus's smile did not fade. "I chose to live," he replied, "while fools like you carry curses." Daniel felt the tension burn between them. Marcus looked at him with something like pity. "You don't understand yet, do you? The child she carries is no miracle, it is a threat. If it is born, the balance between species will break and war will rise. That is why I stand with them, why I help them hunt her." The widow's voice broke, but her fury was clear. "You betrayed your own kind. You betrayed the hope of peace. Marcus turned to her coldly. There is no peace, only power and survival. Daniel shook his head, disbelief twisting his chest. You're human, and yet you side with them against her, against life itself? Marcus's eyes hardened. Yes, because I know the truth. This world does not want hybrids. Your Earth would not want them either. There is no place for creatures of two bloods. Better they are destroyed before they are born. Daniel stepped, forward, fury burning in him. You're wrong, he said firmly. What grows inside her is not a curse. It's a chance. A chance for something greater. Something both worlds fear because they cannot control it. The hunters shifted uneasily, their weapons glowing brighter. Marcus raised his hand to calm them. His eyes never left Daniel. You speak with passion, but passion is weakness. I will give you one chance. Join me. Walk away from her. Help us erase this mistake, and you will live. Refuse, and you will die with her. Daniel's answer was sharp, without hesitation. Then, I die. The widow gasped softly, her eyes wide. Marcus's smile faded into a cold sneer. Fool, he whispered. He dropped his hand, and the hunters stepped forward, weapons aimed. The cavern filled with light as the weapons charged. The widow cried out, clutching her stomach as pain racked her body. Daniel moved closer to her, ready to shield her with his own flesh if he must. But then from the far side of the cavern another sound rose. The grinding of stone, the roar of hidden machinery. The old gate she had pointed to before shuddered and opened. A blast of cold air rushed through, carrying the smell of metal and ozone. The hunters turned in surprise, their weapons lowering for a moment. Daniel seized the chance. He grabbed the widow, pulling her toward the gate. Run, he shouted. They stumbled across the cavern, the widow crying out in pain with every step. The hunters shouted, their boots pounding against stone, energy blasts striking the walls around them. Marcus's voice roared above the chaos. Catch them alive! The child must not leave this place. They reached the gate. The heavy door half open. Daniel forced the widow through first, then turned back, his eyes meeting Marcus's across the cavern. For a brief moment, the two humans stared at each other, one holding hope, the other holding betrayal. Then Daniel pulled the gate closed with all his strength. The sound of metal slammed like thunder, cutting off the shouts and light of the hunters. Inside the passage beyond, darkness swallowed them. The widow collapsed against the wall, gasping, her body trembling. Daniel knelt beside her, his breath heavy. Are you hurt? He asked, fear twisting his words. Her voice was weak but steady. I am alive. But the child, it grows restless. It knows danger. Daniel pressed his hand gently against her shoulder. We'll protect it, he said firmly. We'll protect both of you. She looked at him with tired eyes. You do not understand, human. There are more like Marcus, more who will betray. Not only aliens hunt us, but humans too. Her words sank into him like ice. Daniel realized this fight was bigger than one city, bigger than one world. Enemies were everywhere, even among his own kind. Trust would be rare, betrayal always near. The widow's hand tightened. Around his, her voice soft but full of fire. Then we must never stop, never trust the wrong ones, never give up, because if we fall, the child falls too, and with it, the last chance of hope. Daniel nodded, his heart burning with new resolve. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also revealed the truth. This was not just about survival anymore. It was about protecting something greater than both of them, something worth every risk, every fight, every sacrifice. And as the passage stretched into the unknown, Daniel swore silently to himself. No more running, no more doubt. He would carry this bond to the end, even if it cost his life. The passage stretched endlessly into the dark. Daniel carried the widow's weight against his shoulder. His steps, uneven but steady. The air was damp and cold, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the stone. Behind them, the muffled pounding of hunters still rumbled, though distant now. The widow's breaths came shallow, her face pale under the dim glow of moss. Daniel kept glancing at her, fear tightening his chest. You must rest, he whispered. She shook her head weakly. If we stop now, they will catch us. We must keep moving. The tunnel finally opened into the outside world. Daniel blinked against the sudden brightness of two suns rising over the horizon. The sky burned orange, and violet, strange-winged creatures circled high above. The land stretched wide, a desert of black sand and jagged stone, a cruel beauty that promised no safety. The widow pointed toward the distant cliffs. "There," she whispered. "Beyond those rocks lies an old route, one the hunters fear. If we reach it, we may survive." Daniel nodded and started forward. The sand crunching under his boots, each step felt heavier than the last. The desert air was dry, pulling the strength from his body. But the widow leaned on him, and that was enough to keep him moving. Hours passed under the twin suns. The heat pressed down like fire. Daniel's throat was dry, his skin burning. The widow stumbled often, her body weakening. Still, she pressed her hand against her stomach, guarding the unborn life with a fierce will. Then the sound came. A low growl, deep and hungry. Daniel stopped, his eyes scanning the horizon. From the shadows of the rocks, shapes emerged, beasts taller than men, with 6 legs and jaws lined with glowing teeth. Their eyes locked on the travelers, hunger burning inside them. The widow gasped softly. "Dessert, stalkers," she whispered. "They hunt in packs. They do not stop until they feed." Daniel's chest tightened. He had no weapon, no plan, only his fists and the will to survive. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. The first stalker lunged, sand spraying beneath its claws. Daniel pushed the widow aside and swung a broken stone he grabbed from the ground. The impact cracked against the beast's jaw, forcing it back. But 2 more leapt from the rocks, circling, growling, waiting to strike. The widow cried out, clutching her stomach as another stalker closed in. Daniel moved fast, shoving himself between her and the beast. The glowing teeth snapped inches from his arm. He jammed the stone into its mouth, holding it back with desperate strength. The beast thrashed, its claws raking across his arm, blood spilling hot down his skin. With a roar, Daniel twisted and slammed the creature against the rocks. The stalker howled, staggering back into the sand, but the pack did not retreat. More shapes emerged from the dunes, their growls echoing across the wasteland. The widow's eyes glowed, faintly blue. She raised her hand, strange symbols flickering across her palm. Light burst from her skin, dazzling the beasts. They shrieked, stumbling back, their glowing eyes blinded. Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her close. "What was that?" he gasped. Her voice was weak. "Old power. Forbidden. It drains me." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Then save your strength for the child. I'll handle the rest." He lifted a sharp piece of broken stone, holding it like a blade. The stalkers circled again, but slower now, their growls unsure. They sensed something stronger than prey. At last, with a chorus of snarls, the beasts retreated into the dunes, shadows swallowed by the horizon. Daniel dropped the stone, his breath heavy, his arm bleeding. The widow leaned against him, her body trembling from exhaustion. "You fight like no human I have seen," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "No, I just refuse to let you die." They pressed onward. The cliffs grew closer, jagged walls rising like teeth against the sky. But behind them, faint lights glowed on the horizon. Hunters, still pursuing. The widow saw them too, her voice low. "They will not stop, not until either I or the child is gone." As they reached the cliffs, the ground split into narrow paths. Shadows stretched deep into the cracks, hiding dangers of their own. The widow guided him to a hidden stair carved into the rock. Her steps were weak, but her eyes carried fierce determination. "This way," she whispered. "The hunters fear this path. They say spirits walk here, but it is only memory, only death." Daniel followed her down the winding stair. The air grew colder, filled with whispers of wind that sounded almost like voices. Bones littered the floor, remains of those who had dared this way before. But Daniel did not falter. He had faced beasts, betrayal, and hunters. This place would not break him. At the bottom, they entered a narrow canyon, walls pressing close on both sides. The widow collapsed against the stone, her hand gripping his. Tightly, Daniel knelt, panic flashing through him. "Stay with me," he begged. "Don't give up now." Her voice trembled but remained steady. "I am not giving up, but the child grows restless. It feels the danger, it feels the chase." Daniel swallowed hard. He could hear the faint echoes of hunters entering the canyon above. There was no more time. He lifted her in his arms, his muscles burning, his wounds screaming with pain. But he carried her step after step deeper into the canyon, because turning back was no longer an option. The walls closed around them, the canyon twisting like a maze. Every corner carried the risk of an ambush. Every shadow whispered of betrayal. But Daniel kept moving. The widow's weight heavy, yet also the reason he would not fall. And as the canyon stretched into the unknown, Daniel knew the truth. This was not just escape. This was war. Every beast, every hunter, every traitor was a piece of the same fight. And he would face them all, because the widow and the child were now his bond, his purpose, his reason to endure. The canyon twisted like a serpent, narrow and dark. Daniel carried the widow in his arms, his body screaming with pain, his breath sharp and heavy. Behind them, the echoes of hunters grew closer, voices calling in harsh alien tones, weapons humming with deadly energy. The widow clung to him weakly, her hand pressed against her stomach. Her face was pale, her eyes glowing faintly blue in the shadows. "It is time," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel's steps faltered. "Time for what?" he asked, panic rising. Her lips trembled. "The child. It will not wait. It is coming." Daniel's chest tightened. In the middle of a hunt, in the middle of danger, the child was forcing its way into the world. He looked ahead. The canyon widened into a clearing surrounded by jagged rocks. There was no more path, no more escape. They had reached the end. He laid her gently on the ground, his heart racing. Her breaths came sharp, her body trembling with pain. Daniel knelt beside her, his hands shaking. He had never delivered life before, never faced anything like this, but there was no choice, no time to doubt. The hunters' shadows stretched across the canyon walls. Their silver eyes glowed in the dark, weapons raised. Marcus stepped forward among them, his face cold, his voice sharp. "It ends here, Daniel," he said. "Give her to us, give the child to us, and your suffering will end." Daniel rose slowly, his fists clenched, blood on his arm and sand clinging to his skin. He stood between the widow and the hunters, his body the only shield. "Over my dead body," he growled. Marcus sneered. "That can be arranged." He raised his hand and the hunters stepped closer, weapons humming louder. The clearing lit with deadly light. The widow cried out behind Daniel, her voice sharp with pain and fear. "Daniel, protect the child." Daniel's heart thundered. He grabbed a broken spear from the ground, old and rusted but sharp enough. He faced the hunters, his body shaking but his spirit unbroken. "I will," he whispered to himself. "I will protect them." The first hunter lunged. Daniel swung the spear with all his strength, striking the alien across the chest. The creature fell back, hissing in pain, but another came from the side, claws flashing. Daniel twisted, barely dodging, the claws ripping his shoulder, blood spraying into the sand. Pain burned through him, but he did not fall. He shoved the spear into the beast's throat, forcing it down. Another hunter raised a glowing weapon. Daniel hurled the spear, striking the weapon and sending sparks into the air. The clearing filled with smoke and fire. Marcus shouted, ordering them forward. But the hunters hesitated. Daniel stood bloodied, broken but unyielding. There was something in his eyes, something human, something they feared. Behind him, the widow screamed, her body arching as the child pressed closer to birth. The ground shook faintly, the air vibrating with a strange hum. The hunters froze, their silver eyes flicking to her. Marcus's face twisted in rage. "No, not here, not now." Daniel turned, his heart pounding. The widow's body glowed faintly, light spilling from her hands, her chest, her stomach. The child was coming, and with it, something more than life, something powerful, something unknown. The hunters screamed and rushed forward. Daniel picked up a jagged rock, swinging wildly, smashing into faces, breaking claws. His arms burned, his legs shook, but he refused to fall. He fought like a cornered wolf, savage and desperate. Every strike was not for himself, but for her, for the child, for the promise of tomorrow. Marcus stepped into the fight, a blade glowing with alien fire in his hand. He clashed with Daniel, their strength colliding. Marcus's voice was a hiss of fury. "You fight for nothing, for a mistake. When this child is born, it will destroy us all." Daniel snarled, his voice raw. "No, it will save us all." Their blades clashed again, sparks flying into the dark. Marcus slashed across Daniel's chest, blood spraying. Daniel staggered, but he struck back, smashing the rock against Marcus's jaw. The traitor fell back, his sneer twisted in blood and rage. Behind them, the widow cried out one last time. The air split with a sharp ringing sound. Light burst from her body, flooding the clearing with brilliance. The hunters shielded their eyes, screaming as the glow burned their silver skin. Daniel turned, his vision blurred, and saw the child, born in a storm of light and shadow. The baby's cry echoed through the canyon, not just a cry, but a sound that carried power, shaking the very stone. The hunters stumbled back, fear in their glowing eyes. Marcus stared in horror, his voice breaking. "No, this cannot be." The widow's face was pale, but her eyes glowed, brighter than ever. She held the child close, her voice soft but strong. "It is here. The future is here." Daniel collapsed to his knees beside her, blood pouring from his wounds, but he smiled, his hand trembling as he touched the child's tiny arm. "Stay alive," he whispered, his voice weak but firm. "Stay forever." The hunters hesitated, torn between fear and rage. Marcus raised his blade again, shouting for them to attack, but none moved. The light of the newborn burned too strong. The canyon walls hummed with its cry, shaking the ground beneath their feet, and in that moment Daniel knew this was not the end, this was the beginning. The last stand had brought life, not death. But the true war was only just beginning. The canyon still shook from the newborn's cry. Hunters froze where they stood, their silver eyes wide with fear. Light from the child glowed across the jagged rocks, burning shadows away. Even the twin suns above seemed dim against that strange power. Daniel knelt on the sand, his body broken, blood staining his chest, but his eyes never left the widow and the child in her arms. The baby's skin shimmered faintly, half human, half alien. Its cry was not only sound, it was energy, a force that made stone tremble and hearts waver. The widow rocked the child gently, her pale face glowing with pride and exhaustion. Tears fell from her eyes, though her voice was strong. "You see, Daniel, it is real. The world wanted us gone, but now hope breathes." Daniel's lips trembled, his voice weak. "You kept your promise. You brought life even through death." Marcus staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his jaw where Daniel had struck him. His blade still burned with alien fire, his eyes wild. "No," he shouted, his voice breaking. "This thing is not hope. It is ruin. If it lives, war will come. Both worlds will fall." The hunters looked to him, waiting, but none moved. The child's light unsettled them, breaking their will. Marcus screamed in fury, "Kill them! Kill the child!" But still the hunters hesitated. One dropped his weapon and fled. Another turned his head in shame. Marcus cursed them, rage twisting his face. "You cowards! You would bow to a monster?" Daniel forced himself to stand, his legs shaking, his vision blurred. He stepped in front of the widow and child once more. "If this is a monster," he said, his voice raw but steady, "then I will stand with it because I see life, not death." Marcus charged, his blade aimed at the widow. Daniel caught him mid-strike, their bodies colliding. The blade burned against Daniel's arm, searing his flesh, but he held Marcus back with all his strength. His voice was a growl. "You will not touch them." They struggled in the sand, fury and blood mixing under the twin suns. Marcus's strength was fueled by rage, Daniel's by something deeper, the bond, the promise, the love that had grown between him and the widow, and the hope he saw in the newborn's cry. With a final surge, Daniel wrenched the blade from Marcus's hand and hurled it into the rocks. The fire died with a hiss. Marcus fell back, defeated, his eyes burning with hate. "You are a fool, Daniel," he spat. "You think this ends here? Others will come more than you can fight, and when they do, this child will bring death to all. Daniel's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, his body broken but his spirit unshaken. Then let them come, he said, his voice steady. We will face them together. The widow rose weakly, the child still in her arms. She stepped beside Daniel, her glowing eyes fixed on Marcus. You betrayed your blood, your kind, your soul, she said softly. But you cannot betray the future. Marcus's sneer faltered, his gaze flicking between the glowing child and Daniel's unbroken stance. Then he turned and fled into the canyon shadows, his voice lost in the wind. Silence fell, heavy and deep. The hunters lowered their weapons, some fleeing, others bowing their heads. None dared face the light of the child. The canyon was no longer a battlefield. It was a place of birth, a place of change. Daniel's legs gave way, and he dropped. To his knees, the widow knelt beside him, her hand touching his face gently. You are hurt, she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly, his bloodied lips trembling. It was worth it, he said softly. For you. For the child. The baby's tiny hand reached out, touching Daniel's chest. A warmth spread through him, dulling his pain. For a moment he felt weightless, whole. The widow gasped softly. It knows you, she whispered. It accepts you. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He whispered to her, his voice broken but filled with truth. Stay, forever. The widow's lips trembled, her tears glowing in the strange light. I will, she said. We will together. But even as the moment wrapped them in warmth, shadows loomed beyond the canyon. Ships glided in the sky, dark against the light of the suns. Far away, horns of war echoed. The hunters were only the beginning. Armies would come, leaders would rise, fear would spread across worlds. Daniel held the widow and child close, his eyes narrowing at the skies above. He was no longer a lost traveler, no longer a lonely human searching for a place. He had found his purpose, his bond, his reason to fight. The widow leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice soft but certain. The war has not ended. It has only begun, but with you, with us, the child will live. Daniel tightened his hold on them. He stared at the horizon where danger and hope walked together. And in his heart, he swore, no matter what came, no matter who hunted them, he would protect them until the end. The canyon wind howled, carrying their vow across the sands, not as a farewell, but as a beginning. The child's light flickered, brighter, and the future opened, uncertain and vast, but Daniel's whisper carried through it all. Stay forever.